Hello everyone and welcome back to another Worms Wednesday. I'm your host, Rick Snikety, playing as the Blue Worms this game. It's an online Xbox game played pro scheme. I'm commentating at 2x speed. Seems to be a single island, 2 tanks on either side, mortar on the left, sniper on the right, and a central building in the middle. This is just a public ranked match, and I'm really excited about this matchup because it gets, in my opinion, really intense at the end. And there's so many different things that I could commentate on. This is about my third or fourth time trying to get everything in, and I always end up missing something I think is really critical. So I'm going to try my best not to over-commentate this game as best as I can, and just give what I think is the best analysis. If you've watched any of my other videos, you've noticed I tend to say a lot that having the worm advantage, having more worms than your opponent as the games goes on and on, tends to become a really big disadvantage. I want to clarify that. I think that the more worms you have, as the water starts to rise, or as your opponent has less worms, I guess the essence of Worms WMD, or Worms genre in general, is that the map is ever changing. The crates, the vehicles, the terrain itself. At some point, you need to favor mobility over power. I think the best thing to do is to get your opponent's worms to as low a health as possible, and then quickly at the end of the game, one-shot them kind of. Now, you can keep all your worms alive, but I think that you would have to be able to have a really good position in order to be able to get away with that. And that can be really difficult at some point. So yeah, if your worms are all at 100, you definitely keep them. But if your worms are dropping low in health, you might want to consider getting rid of a worm. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but this game can be so complex in the way the map structure is. It's all about spatial awareness, it's all about positioning, and that's why I think it's a great game. Now, last thing here, and I'll shut up for a little bit. If you ever find an opponent that's in a vehicle or in a turret, consider jumping in the turret or the vehicle first so that they hop out and then place the mine down. I think if my opponent would have done that, they would have been able to shoot me off the edge of the map there, which would of course gotten rid of that worm. You can see a big difference in the amount of health between my opponent and me. But as I said, and as you'll see, hopefully that doesn't give too much away, that quickly matters less and less. Because right now I still have 4 worms, I have a gas grenade in store, I have positions all throughout the map, this should be easy. And I haven't been making any mistakes at all. And here you'll see my first mistake. Drop this worm, but I accidentally hit just the edge of it, and I'm not able to hit that worm, Jeff, with that grass grenade, which would have been key, because this is my satellite worm. This worm on the left side is my only worm that can interact with that worm. So if I lose that worm, it's going to be pretty difficult to get to Jeff, which I do end up doing. So now you can see that big score advantage just completely went away. And that's how quickly your luck can change in this town. Still have my other 2 worms. 2 of them have 100 health, 1 of them has 60 health, and the worms that my opponent does have on my side are pretty low relative to what they started with. And I'm pretty confident that I won't have a problem with them. But since the turret's blown up, all I have left, not that the turret would have helped me too much, all I have left is a tank and a worm on foot. And this is where I opt to get rid of one of my worms, because I think it would be better to have that kind of increased mobility over having not the increased mobility. Because you can see how this terrain is shaped itself. Yeah, I have a tank, but I can't get it out. So it's not going to do me any good for like 2 or 3 moves unless I can create a pathway to end up shooting my opponent. Gonna go for the shotgun on VP, finish him off. And so now it's a 2v1 with both of my worms having 100 health, my opponent only having 100. And at this point, I really do consider my opponent to have pretty much the advantage here. Not only is my opponent burrowed and I'm in the open with one of my worms, I'm pretty much in the open with both of my worms. And there's a lot of space in between us. Just shooting some shots in the air here. Hopefully hitting that girder. Figure maybe if I hit it just right, I can drop an airstrike in there. But I was not able to get the shot in. Now my opponent goes for dropping submarine missile, and I know exactly where that's going. That's going on that completely exposed tank in there, which will do a lot of damage. In this worm with Hot Dog, I'm trying to get that package on the left, that drop crate on the left, and I'm going to try to get a girder on top of my other worm's tank, and it's going to come down to it very close. Have 3 seconds left to spare, and that airstrike should drop right on top of that girder, minimizing damage as much as possible. Still ends up doing 24. All things considered, I'm pretty happy with that. If you watch my previous videos, you'll know and you'll see, maybe even if you've played ranked yourself, the higher the level, the more things the opponent's doing in a turn. They're usually picking up a crate, they're usually nudging a worm, and they're usually also doing damage, if at all possible. So in more lower ranked games, you'll see one thing done. You'll see someone move into a position, get a shot in, and then they're not able to retreat. A really good Worms player is able to do resource gathering, deal damage, and move into a better position, all in one turn. Here you see me moving into a position to try to open up an avenue where I can mortar that opponent's worm. And they go for a double assault here, going for the tank, trying to mortar, and also go for kind of an infantry assault. Now the reason I did this is the same reason I did this same thing last turn. So I want to prevent that mortar from being used by my opponent's worm as much as possible. If my opponent gets to the top of that barbed wire geometry there and is able to hop through onto that mortar, Hot Dog would be pretty much toast. So it is absolutely essential that I'm able to get that girder up to prevent that from happening. Opponent gets that mortar. If I've opened up the avenue with a tank, they could quickly also take out my tank, and the game would pretty much be over. So Hot Dog's at 56, my opponent's worm still is at 100, and now they're going to opt for, I believe, dropping a phone bomb. If my opponent would drop that auto turret, I don't think I would have had any solution. Now Hot Dog's at 11, Jeff's at 50, and I'm just going to cycle through and drop sheep. So this game could have very easily have gone the other way if my opponent would have dropped that auto turret. And that's how quickly your luck can change in this town. I want to thank you guys all for joining me today. Hope to see you guys next week. Peace out.